Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran, and today we are taking a look at the next part of everything wrong with the guns of Fallout 4. If you were in the last episode, you know that things got pretty cringe and drove me pretty crazy. And so hopefully these will be less crazy, but I sort of doubt it. Let's get into it.
Pistol ammunition, which would make it either an SMG or a carbine. What makes it even more confusing is that the magazine is obviously designed for rifle caliber ammunition due to its size. There's no sense in making a magazine this wide if it's going to use 45, so in reality, it should be about half the width.
Yeah, this could be a 45 if it's like 45 long Colt. That's the only situation that I can conceive of something like that. Let me show you if I can find a picture of just how much longer a 45 long Colt is than anything else, right? It can be pretty significant. Okay, so here, let's see, perfect. Okay, so here is 45 long Colt and here's 45 ACP. So it's not quite a rifle length round, and for a bunch of reasons, right? This nubby tip, definitely it cannot be a rifle, right? It doesn't have the aerodynamics to travel rifle length distances, but it can still get some pretty good reach on it. Obviously here's a 45 ACP. So and 45 long Colt is I'm sorry. Let me get you guys that. There you go. 45 long Colt is famous for its there you go. 45 long Colt is famous for its use in cowboy guns, right? 6-shooter revolvers and lever action rifles. And it was known as a classic cowboy round because, well, you know, hashtag it could do both. You would buy a single set of rounds and you would shoot them out of your lever action carbine or rifle and could carry them in your pistol. It was a very efficient cartridge, right? Obviously, as you can see, it packs quite a big punch compared to the 45 ACP.
The only way it makes sense is when you upgrade it to 308s, but that should be the default caliber. To give it some credit, at least the ejection port is on the right side, but where I won't give it any points is for the aesthetics. It's just not very pretty. It looks like something a kindergartner would draw if you told them to draw a rifle. It's an odd design choice for sure, especially considering it looks like a Russian PPSH.
It's not a PPSH, hold on, it's a BAR. Let me show you guys. All right. Oh, it shows me the results for bar. Yeah, okay. Yes, I would bar a drinking spot, right? Here's a BAR, and here is the combat rifle. So this is obviously, I mean, the inspiration is like incredibly obvious. It's so clear that this is meant to be a BAR parody, I guess.
The themes here really don't scream American. It looks too much like a commie gun, if you ask me. Not this garbage. I rate it 1 out of 5 bottle caps. Moving on to its cousin, the combat shotgun. It's basically got the same exact look as the combat rifle, but this one is a shotgun variant.
Wait, this looks
Honestly,
like a PPSH.
It can be tough to discern this one from the combat rifle at first glance because they are nearly identical.
What?
That's just lazy design if you ask me. So I don't need to reiterate myself too much on the...
Yeah, I've never heard of someone having the exact same design of a gun just with different calibers. That's ridiculous. Who would do anything like that? Taking just like the same gun design and just spamming it in all sorts of different calibers and permutations. It's ridiculous. Why would anyone ever want to do something like that? Just silly. Just silly, right? Everyone knows that a gun should be designed from the ground up to be original. Otherwise, you're just a hack.
The aesthetics. It's kind of ugly and it looks too much like a PPSH. As for its function, well, I guess it would function, and in practice it is pretty fun to use. Ultimately though, that doesn't make up for its lack of originality. I'll give it 1 out of 5 bottle caps. Now I suppose I have to mention
Wait. Okay, this deserves a little bit more love than it gets. First off, yeah, this barrel does look like a PPSH. This is actually the PPSH inspired barrel. It has that handguard. Yeah, it's got the rails. That doesn't make any sense. It's got a drum magazine. I'm not seeing anything too crazy unrealistic. This is probably one of the more realistic guns that they've profiled so far.
This thing is because it's really not an assault rifle. If anything, it should be an LMG. but I can see why Bethesda was confused when classifying this gun, because it's a cursed abomination that was fused together from other guns. Just looking at it, you can tell that the barrel is inspired by the Lewis gun, which is a British World War I water-cooled LMG, and the iron sights are that of an AA gun. Even weirder, the foregrip looks an awful lot like an M249, which is a modern LMG. The aesthetics are certainly clashing, and this thing shouldn't exist. Water-cooled guns were already phased out by World War II, so why would the US Army still be using them well into the 21st century?
So here's the thing with a water-cooled gun is its problem is that it's really heavy, and it was more efficient to just have barrels that you change out every so often. Now, here's the thing. If you had a world of power armor, a water-cooled man-portable gun may actually make some sense, right? The barrel would not overheat. It would be able to sustain a way higher rate of fire, and given that it's magazine fed, it actually sort of has some synergy because your constraint is actually your ability to reload, not your ability to burn through 100 round drum mags of ammo. So if you're constrained by having a 3-second gap every 50 rounds or so, then it would sort of make sense if you live in a world where people have power armor, sort of. Again, we've solved the water cooling problem with a bunch of other stuff. Right now, modern materials can just build a barrel that holds up better. You also have things like the Gatling gun model where you have just multiple barrels so that by the time the 6th barrel rotates through, think a minigun, the first barrel fires, and then you have 6, almost an entire rotation to cool, and then that barrel fires again. It really lets you pump out rounds way quicker.
It's certainly not practical or logical to do so, and the design is flawed in so many ways. This monstrosity is obese and takes up way too much space, just like your mom. It's so comically unergonomic that it looks more like a blimp rather than a firearm.
Again, I wonder if you lived in a world of power armor, would ergonomics take a back seat in weapon design? I think actually more realistically, you're looking at probably ergonomics looking different, right? There's things like could it be easily clipped to the outside of power armor? Could it be held stably? Those sort of ergonomic questions. Can you use it with big clunky hands, right? Where you can't feel what you're doing. All really important questions. But what's also, I think, important to note is that when new technology comes out, right? Look at the first tank. The first tank, they weren't really sure how to use it. So tank weapon systems weren't really that evolved. It took time for them to realize that the thing that should be on the top of a tank is a turret, right? The first tanks were basically infantry fighting vehicles. They had a bunch of machine guns bristling off them, and it was a very different concept. And so you could see possibly in the Fallout world, you develop power armor, but it would take time to develop the systems, the weapons, the tactical implementation of a power armored soldier, right? And you build gear around the role on the battlefield, right? Maybe a power armored soldier is best with a water cooled machine gun for some reason.
You could Photoshop the pretty one with a stock and a grip attached.
Or maybe it's not, and somebody was just like, F it, let's just try giving them a water cooled machine gun. And then they realize that doesn't work, and they go, let's give them a rocket launcher. And eventually they settled on something that actually makes sense. Then
place the picture next to the Fallout 4 assault rifle, and I would not be able to tell the difference. The side magazine is an odd choice too, and I would let it pass, but I can tell the only reason this design choice was made was so that they could reuse animations from the pipe gun. It's another lazy and goofy design from Bethesda. It doesn't really fit the theme, nor does it make sense, especially considering that guns like the G3 and M16 were present in previous games. I can only assume that this special assault rifle was created later in the timeline, but the question is why? It's regressive in every aspect, and sports no advantages over the already well-established and combat-proven assault rifles. I really hope this one gets retconned out of the Fallout lore. It seems like a fever dream for sure, and after this video, I'm gonna pretend like it never existed. With a
He really hates this. Even though, again, using antiquated technology sometimes makes sense if you don't have the logistic tail to repair it. Here's another good example. The Afghan Air Force, right? The US Air Force flies high-end fighter jets. The Soviet Air Force flew top-tier fighter jets, right? But both of those countries were industrial powers, and they had the logistics system to keep those planes flying. Regular maintenance, spare parts, detailed testing to make sure that the planes were still flying and functional, right? Extensive pilot training to make sure their pilots and their mechanics could operate it. The Afghan Air Force had none of these things, right? Oftentimes their maintainers were barely high school educated, and holding on to maintainers took a long time. They had a very, very poor logistical tail, right? Parts would go missing, get destroyed. So what the US realized it needed was to actually look backwards, and it began to purchase for the Afghan Air Force prop-driven combat aircraft. These were close air support aircraft that used propellers, simple engines that if you can fix a car engine, you can fix a prop engine. And by relying on this much, much simpler system that required way less logistics, way more simple to maintain, it actually proved to be more combat effective because the Afghan Air Force could actually get it out the door. Now, of course, it wasn't perfect, right? You'd still had a logistical tail, and the fact is that the endemic corruption in Afghanistan meant that parts were constantly being sold off for scrap, and they spent most of their time in hangars. But it is an illustration of the fact that sometimes if you don't live in a society that can manufacture, say, spare barrels for an LMG, you might turn to the past to look for new ways to solve modern problems.
All that being said, the assault rifle gets 0 out of 5 bottle caps because it is the ugliest gun in the entire game. Now that we're done with that, hopefully I never have to lay my eyes upon that abomination ever again. Let's take a moment and cleanse our eyes with some bleach. I'll give you all a break and review the Deliverer. This little pocket pistol is based on the Walther PPK, and it's a pretty good representation overall. I do have a...
Okay, no, it's a Makarov. It's a Makarov. It's not a Walther. Let me show you guys. He's just whiffing a lot on this. No, here's a Makarov, right? Just gaze upon it. This is a Mac. There's his rifles. Notice how, yeah, it has the same hammer, sure, but like it still has an external hammer like that. You can still see similar trigger, but so does the Makarov, right? It's again, it's close, but I'd say it's a little more, well, no, he's probably right. It's probably the Walther, because look at the magazine, right? And then look at the Makarov magazine. It fits firmly into the gun. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Look at that. It still has a jet. So the answer is it's really, really, really close to a Walther. And a Makarov. A
couple of complaints, though. It's chambered for the 10mm cartridge, and the magazine somehow holds 12 rounds, but that's just not possible. In reality, the PPK commonly uses 32 or 380, and it can only hold 7 or 8 rounds in the standard magazine. So I have no clue.
The Makarov actually fires a round called 9mm Makarov, and while it's also 9mm, it is a very different looking round than a regular 9mm. Here we go. Here is an example of 9x17, which is 38 ACP, 380, excuse me. Now here is a 9x18 Makarov. Basically, the 9x18 Makarov, I mean, you can see it's almost an identical round to 380 38 ACP. So you can see why Walther PPK, one of these people, either Walther or the Soviets, took the other one and just imported it and brought it over. And then you have 9x19 9mm, and you can kind of get a sense of why this may be the default round.
How this tiny magazine could hold 12 rounds of 10mm. It may not be a game breaker, but I will have to deduct a few points for that. Other than that little nitpick, it's a pretty good gun, and it's one of the better ones in Fallout for sure. I'll be nice this time, and rate it 4 out of 5 bottle caps. On to the next one, the 44 Revolver. This one is based on the Smith & Wesson Model 29, and it's yet another fair representation, so I don't have too much.
Yeah, that's a really fair representation. They just gave it, all right, why would you give it 2 hammers? See, notice how the Fallout one has a top hammer and a bottom hammer? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Much to rant about. The only gripe I have is that it's forever stuck in single action, when it should be capable of double action. You can choose to fire double action revolvers in single action if you so wish, but it's just a little disappointing that you can't use it to its full potential. Also, when reloading it, you'll always reload 6 rounds, which is odd, but it does work. And I would assume there's a speed loader involved in that, but if you slow it down...
The funny thing is, single action revolvers that only function on single action had a different reload mechanism. You would actually have to clear each individual round out of the cylinder and then load each individual round and then close a gate to get it to fire. It was a simpler mechanism, again, for a time that didn't have the same material science. It was harder to build a gun that was lightweight but still powerful enough to withstand the chamber pressures of those rounds.
You can see that there is indeed no speed loader, or maybe it's just got that invisible paint job on it. But no, your character just shoves all 6 rounds right into the cylinder simultaneously with their bare hands. I suppose they're just really good with their fingers. Yet again, another prime example of laziness from Bethesda. Overall though, the 44 is pretty good, and it is serviceable. I shall stay benevolent and give this one 3 out of 5 bottle caps. So that covers all the guns from the base game, but I haven't forgotten about the DLC. Let's start with the radium rifle. This one's pretty interesting because it deals radiation and ballistic damage. It's actually based on the Volkssturmgewehr, which is a historical World War II weapon, in Fallout 4 here. It's been...
Okay, let's look at this thing. Oh, it says it deals radiation damage. Okay, well, this is pure fiction. Pure fiction. It would deal way more radiation damage to you than it ever would to an enemy. And the only way really you could do it is if the rounds themselves were, say, made of some sort of irradiated substance, like not depleted uranium or something.
Been modified to make
so it's hard to level criticism at a gun that does, shoots the equivalent of like unicorn farts,
There's some kind of technology which imbues it with the power of radiation. I'm not sure why that would be necessary, but I suppose that's something the children of Adam would do. They do like their radiation after all. However, I have no clue how this contraption would actually function. It just seems like a whole bunch of extra work for not much payout. The Volkssturmgewehr in particular is also an odd choice considering that it's a rather rare German weapon. So how did all the children of Adam get these guns in the first place? It's not like they ordered them from across the ocean. They even had a...
I mean, here's the thing, guys. It's just like any other weapon system. If you've seen it, that design sits in your inspo brain. It's sort of like the Galil, right? The Israeli assault rifle. Obviously, the Galil drew heavily on the AK, right? But it didn't necessarily, it's not really an AK clone. Let me see if I can show you what I mean. Okay, here. Let's get you guys, there we go. Okay, check it out. So this is an example of a AK-47, a Chinese Type 56S. Here, below it, is an IMI Galil. You can see there's a lot of similarities. Look at the similar safety. The safety is exactly the same. They both use a folding stock. They both have a similar magazine well, a similar chamber, similar action, though this has a carry handle. It has a bipod below it. The gas tube is actually, I think it might be disconnected. So there's some design differences, but at the end of the day, you would be crazy to think that the Galil did not draw heavy inspiration from the AK. And just like it would make total sense that you would find a weapon like this in a book or in a video, and that you would use it as inspiration in your own super radio weapon.
45, because its native 792 Kurz cartridge would not.
I do love the fact that this is a radioactive weapon and it has a radio dish on it.
Be circulating in the Commonwealth.
That's
and
not
for
really
some odd reason,
the same
they
thing.
decided to take off the iron sights on this gun because aiming is overrated, I suppose? Other than all that nonsense, the radium rifle is not too bad. I can appreciate the idea of turning an old gun into something new, but this one just seems out of place. I'll give it 1.5 bottle caps. And now for the lever action. At first glance, it looks fine, but this is Fallout 4, so it's got the ejection port on the wrong side, as usual. You can tell it's noticeably inspired by the Marlin lever action, and while it does look plenty different, it still looks pretty good, and
Yeah. This actually looks like a functional weapon.
As
Why is he labeled it as
You can tell
mega
it's
cringe?
noticeably inspired by the Marlin lever action, And while it does look plenty different, it still looks pretty good, and I see no problems with it whatsoever. That's what I would say if I didn't know how to count. It appears Bethesda doesn't know simple math, because with the lever action, your player will always reload 5 rounds into the tube, no matter what. Even if you only shot 1 round, you will still load 5 whole rounds, which is physically impossible. I'm not sure where those extra rounds would even go. Perhaps they get warped into that special pocket dimension like I mentioned earlier. That's the only lore explanation that I can think of.
I get it, man. Listen, we get it. Fallout 4 was a lazily made game. It just was. I'm sorry. But you just got to get past it. We've had bad reload animations for most of gaming history, my dog.
But no.
I get it. They weren't making Escape from Tarkov.
There's no justifying this. To make matters even worse, when you upgrade the weapon with a longer magazine tube, it doesn't actually extend your magazine. I remember that the first time I picked it up, I was so excited to get to use this badass lever action, but after I reloaded it for the first time, I was struck with overwhelming disappointment, and my immersion was completely shattered. It seriously pains my soul to watch as my character unimmersively reloads the incorrect amount of rounds. Literally unplayable. Not only does it break your immersion, but it also makes the gun weaker due to its artificially prolonged reload. What's especially puzzling is that New Vegas had
This may actually be a balancing mechanic, right? Sometimes powerful weapons need some sort of detraction, and that can be a long reload. The other thing I want to point out is that getting an extended magazine tube doesn't necessarily mean the outside will look extended. The reason could be, this sounds ridiculous, but in the real world, many states have regulations about, for example, what sort of shotgun is legal. Like if I'm hunting the fowl, like waterfowl fowl in, I think it's Pennsylvania, right? My shotgun can't carry more than 2 rounds, which means for me to legally hunt with it, I actually have to put in a device that shortens the barrel or shortens the magazine tube, right, to just be 2 rounds. That way, if a game warden inspects the rifle, he'll say, yes, this is legal. It only holds 2 rounds plus the one in the chamber. But so if I was to extend that magazine tube, it would just be removing a block. Again, does Fallout 4 strike me as a world where there's strict regulations on hunting? Probably not. At least not hunting mutants.
a working bullet counted reload on its lever action, so Bethesda has the technology to implement this mechanic, they just simply refuse to do it for Fallout 4. Whatever the reasoning may be, it was a stupid decision. And it's just another example of their laziness and lack of attention to detail. They did finally fix the problem though. In Fallout 76, that is. They patched the lever action reload to work properly, but they forgot about Fallout 4 though. But I guess that doesn't really matter in the end, because modders fixed that issue long before Bethesda ever addressed it.
Yeah, I really hate Bethesda. Okay, corporation rant incoming. I hate Bethesda and their commitment, their insane commitment to relying on modders to fix their problems. I hate it, cannot stand it, because it simply sits there and goes, listen, I don't pay the modders for their product, right? Bethesda makes this game and then counts on free labor from other people, from strangers, to fix their own game, right? And then relies on their fans to go out, download these unauthorized mods that may or may not run well on your machine, that may or may not contain, malicious code, right? I don't vet these mods. There's a reason I've never played a modded Fallout 4. And it's not because I don't believe in them. It's because I don't really know what I'm installing on my machine. And if I don't know that it's from a trusted source, I generally try not to put it on my computer, right? This is my living on this thing. So when Bethesda sits there and goes, we're not going to fix our own game, we are going to outsource it onto the community who will labor for free to do this, to make our game playable, is complete and utter nonsense. And it's like corruption, basically.
I'm being a little dramatic over a problem that's already been fixed, but that doesn't change the fact that my first Far Harbor playthrough was ruined due to the lever action being broken. I will never forget Bethesda for this atrocity, for the crimes they committed against the gun community. They shall pay for their insolence. I give the lever action -5 out of 5 bottle caps. Anyway, on to the last gun, the Handmade rifle from Nuka World.
I appreciate him both acknowledging and I appreciate him acknowledging the gun nerd idiosyncrasy, and also acknowledging it. He feels both truly feels this way and also recognizes he's absurd for feeling this way.
It's obviously based on the AK platform, and more specifically, it's inspired by the infamous Shovel AK, and that's pretty funny. I'll give him some bonus points for that one. But it's a homemade variant, which sports a custom design. It's noticeably different because, well, I suppose it'd be hard to replicate a machined AK with simple tools, and that makes perfect sense to me. But again, this one has a left-sided ejection port as well, so I will have to deduct a point for that. Other than that, I'd have to say that the Handmade rifle...
I mean, I think the left-side ejection port actually, to me, it's just Fallout. It's mirror universe. Though what they should do is make everyone carry the guns left-handed, but that bothers people.
Is my favorite gun from Fallout 4. It's the full package, really. It's got a cool, rugged aesthetic, so it fits perfectly into the wasteland. It's also one of the most effective guns in the game, too. It's a DPS machine, to say the least, and it simply feels good to shoot. For the most part, the animations in Fallout 4 kinda suck, but the Handmade rifle is perhaps the only exception. They're pretty satisfying, honestly. No other complaints here. I genuinely like the Handmade rifle, and while it could certainly be better, it's a step in the right direction.
I love how it's so obviously flawed with the ergonomic nonsense shovel handle. This thing, just cutting a random hole in your action is stupid. It's like max stupid. Why on earth would you cut a hole in your action? Also, shout out to this, the bottom being a standard handguard and the top being one of those like B-17 ventilated handguards.
It's one of the few ugly...
I love how he just gives it a pass because it's sort of like an AK that someone really designed. And he's like, it's a fun troll design. Instead of being like every other rifle where he's like, it's stupid, it doesn't use the right caliber.
Guns that I'll give a pass
like,
to.
Bro, these are all cursed guns.
Because it makes sense. 4 out of 5 bottle caps for this one. I do like it. I'd love to see Bethesda make more handmade guns like this, rather than those stinky pipe guns. And that wraps up everything wrong with the guns in Fallout 4. I know there's plenty more weapons in total, but like I said...
All right, guys, definitely like and subscribe to this dude. The link is always in the description. And of course, gents, if you want to see me break down real-world combat videos that are way too spicy for YouTube, become a member of the Patreon. Thanks to my lieutenant tier patrons. You guys make this possible. Catch you in the next one.